Under the soft glow of a street lamp, Michael Trent stood outside a luxury boutique, adjusting his suit jacket. The store had been closed for hours, its darkened windows reflecting the empty street. Glancing at his phone, he grew impatient as the minutes ticked by. Joshua, his assistant, was late. Again. Leaning against the window, Michael scanned the street for any sign of Joshua's car when heavy footsteps approached. "Hey!" a voice barked. Michael looked up to see a white police officer striding toward him, hand resting on his belt. The officer's gaze was sharp, filled with suspicion, as he sized Michael up. Michael recognized the posture, the look. He'd dealt with it before. "What are you doing here?" the officer demanded, his tone more accusatory than curious. Michael straightened, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Just waiting for someone," he said evenly. The officer stopped a few feet away, eyes narrowing as he scanned the empty street. "Waiting this late, outside a closed shop?" "That's right," Michael replied calmly. "My ride's running late." The officer's gaze hardened, his hand inching toward his flashlight. "Doesn't look right to me. You sure you're not loitering? Maybe up to something else?" A flicker of annoyance rose in Michael's chest, but he kept his composure. "I'm not loitering. I'm standing here, waiting for a ride. That's it." The officer's lips curled into a cold smirk. "Standing around in a suit, huh? What's the occasion? Trying to look important?" Michael met his gaze, irritation sparking but voice steady. "I'm just waiting, officer. Nothing else is going on." The officer stepped closer, his presence imposing. "Doesn't seem like that to me. You don't exactly blend in around here, standing alone this late. You sure you're not trying to break in?" Michael's pulse quickened. He'd been in situations like this before, where explanations didn't matter, and assumptions spoke louder than reason. "There's no need for accusations. I'm not breaking into anything. I'm waiting for a ride." The officer's eyes locked on Michael, daring him to say more. "Got any ID?" Michael's jaw tightened. He wasn't about to give in so easily. "I don't need to show you my ID. I'm not doing anything wrong." The officer's expression darkened, his hand hovering near his belt. "You don't decide that. When I ask for ID, you show it. Or are you hiding something?" Michael took a deep breath, frustration mounting. "I've told you what I'm doing. That should be enough. There's no reason for this to escalate." The officer's stance shifted, his voice dropping. "I decide how far this goes, not you. Right now, you're giving me plenty of reasons to keep asking questions." Michael clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. "There's no need for this. I'm not a threat, and I'm not breaking any laws. I'm just waiting." The officer stepped closer, now inches from Michael, his smirk returning. "Funny how you keep saying that, but I'm not convinced. In fact, I'm starting to think you don't belong here at all." Michael's patience wore thin. "I have every right to be here." The officer's smirk widened, the tension thick. "We'll see about that. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, until I'm satisfied." The two men stood locked in a silent standoff. Michael felt the weight of the situation pressing down, the officer's suspicion, the unspoken threats. He glanced up the street, hoping for Joshua's car, but the road remained empty. Seconds stretched into minutes as the officer hovered, watching, waiting for Michael to slip. The quiet street felt suffocating, the street lamp casting long shadows across the pavement. "I'll be watching," the officer muttered, his tone low and threatening. Michael didn't respond, his eyes hardening as he held the officer's gaze. There was nothing more to say. Not yet. They stood there, caught in an unspoken clash, neither willing to back down as the cool night stretched on. Michael remained firm, his body tense as the officer refused to relent. Still no sign of Joshua, the tension was palpable, thick as if the night itself crackled with electricity. "I've explained myself," Michael said, his voice controlled despite creeping frustration. "I'm waiting for someone. There's no reason for this." The officer stepped closer, hand never leaving his belt where his handcuffs and flashlight rested. "I don't care what you've said," he replied, his voice cold and condescending. "Something about you doesn't sit right with me." Michael clenched his fists, but kept them at his sides. "What doesn't sit right? That I'm standing here in a suit, or that you don't think I belong here?" The officer's eyes flashed with anger. "Watch your tone. I'm the one asking questions, not you." Michael's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You're questioning me for no reason. You've been here 10 minutes. If I were doing something wrong, you'd have figured it out by now." The officer's face twisted into a smirk. "Oh, I figured plenty out. Guys like you always think you're too smart to get caught. But you're not. You think I don't see this for what it is? Loitering, looking for a chance to break into a place like this." Michael couldn't hold back any longer. "Loitering? That's what you think this is? I'm waiting for my assistant. That's it. You've been harassing me, and now you're looking for any excuse to make it worse." The officer's smirk vanished, replaced by a hardened glare. "Harassing you? I'm doing my job, keeping people like you from causing trouble in places like this." Michael stepped forward, his voice cold. "People like me? What exactly do you mean by that?" "You know damn well what I mean," the officer snapped, his voice rising. "You think you're slick, standing here all calm like you're innocent. But I've seen this before. A suit doesn't change who you are." Michael's heart pounded, anger bubbling over. "You don't know a thing about who I am." "I know enough," the officer shot back. "You're just another punk who thinks he can talk his way out of trouble." Michael took a deep breath, trying to keep control. "I haven't done anything wrong. You're the one trying to create trouble where there isn't any." The officer's hand moved toward his cuffs, his eyes narrowing. "You're real close to stepping over the line." "And what line is that?" Michael asked, his voice steady but sharp. "The line where I stop letting you bully me for standing on a public sidewalk?" The officer's grip tightened on the cuffs. "You think you're smart, huh? You think you can mouth off to me? I've got the authority here, not you." Michael's blood boiled, but he held his ground. "Authority doesn't give you the right to harass people for no reason." The officer stepped forward, now inches from Michael's face. "I don't need a reason if I feel threatened. And right now, I don't like the way you're talking to me." Michael could feel the situation spiraling, the officer's aggression escalating with each word, but he wasn't backing down. "You feel threatened?" Michael asked, incredulous. "I'm standing here, unarmed, waiting for a ride, and you're threatening to arrest me. That's not how this works." The officer's jaw clenched, his hand hovering over the cuffs. "I'll decide how this works. You're done talking." Michael squared his shoulders, meeting the officer's gaze head-on. "I'm not done until you stop treating me like a criminal." The officer's eyes blazed with fury, and without another word, he grabbed for the cuffs. "That's it. You're under arrest." Michael's heart pounded as the officer's hand moved toward him, the cuffs gleaming under the street lamp. This was it. It was happening, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Michael's heart raced as the officer grabbed the cuffs, the cold steel glinting in the dim light. The weight of the moment hit him all at once. He couldn't let this happen. Instinctively, he stepped back, hands raised. "You can't do this," he said, his voice sharp, anger and fear mixing. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's eyes flared, his grip tightening on Michael's arm. "You just crossed the line, don't resist!" Michael jerked his arm away, pulse pounding. "I'm not resisting, but you're not arresting me for no reason." The officer's face twisted with frustration, his hand shooting out again, this time with more force. He caught Michael's wrist, pulling him forward with a rough yank. "You think you're above the law? Think again." Michael tried to pull free, his movements quick but controlled. "Get off me." The officer's patience snapped. "You want to resist? Fine," he growled. shoving Michael hard against the boutique window. The glass rattled from the impact. Michael's shoulder slammed into the cold surface, pain radiating through his body. I said, "Get off." Michael struggled to twist free, muscles tense with adrenaline. The officer leaned in close, pressing Michael harder against the window, his breath hot on Michael's neck. "I told you to stop resisting," he snarled. Michael's breath came in short bursts as he tried to push the officer away. His mind raced. How had this escalated so fast? "I'm not resisting. You're the one pushing this too far." The officer's grip tightened, fingers digging into Michael's arm. "That's it. I'm done playing with you." Without warning, the officer swung his fist, the punch landing squarely on Michael's jaw, a brutal impact that sent him reeling. His head snapped to the side, pain exploding across his face as he stumbled against the window. His vision blurred, the world spinning. Michael gasped, hand instinctively going to his face, the sharp sting radiating through his skull. He struggled to steady himself, mind reeling from the shock. "You just had to push it," the officer muttered, his voice cold. He grabbed Michael again, slamming him face first into the glass with more force. "Now you're gonna learn your lesson." Michael groaned, chest pressed hard against the window, the officer's rough hand squeezing his arms behind him. "You can't do this," he panted, struggling to find his voice through the haze of pain. "Watch me," the officer snarled, wrenching Michael's arms back. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, metal biting into his skin. Michael's body slumped slightly, cheek pressed against the cold glass, his mind swimming between pain and disbelief. He tried to turn his head, but the officer's weight kept him pinned, his breath shallow. "On the ground," the officer ordered, pulling him back and shoving him toward the pavement. Michael stumbled, barely catching himself before his knees hit the ground. He was panting, face throbbing where the officer's fist had struck. His thoughts spun wildly. How had it come to this? He'd done nothing wrong, and now he was cuffed, assaulted by the very people meant to protect him. The officer stood over him, chest rising with pent-up rage. "Maybe next time you'll think twice about resisting arrest." Michael looked up, vision still swimming, but his voice came out firm, laced with pain. "You're going to regret this," the officer sneered, towering over him. "Not as much as you will." As the night air pressed down, Michael knew this was far from over. This was just the beginning. Michael felt the handcuffs bite into his wrists as the officer pushed him toward the patrol car. His jaw throbbed, his body tense, but beneath the pain, a calmness settled over him. He knew something the officer didn't, and that knowledge gave him the upper hand. The officer, still brimming with self-satisfaction, opened the back door with a sharp tug. "Get in," he ordered, voice full of authority. "I warned you not to resist." Michael didn't move. Instead, he straightened, took a deep breath, and with a quiet, almost smug smile said, "Before you throw me in that car, why don't you check my ID?" The officer froze, hand still on the door, brow furrowing. "What are you talking about?" Michael's smile grew slightly. "You heard me. Check my ID. It's in my wallet." The officer hesitated, narrowing his eyes as if suspecting a trick. "You've had plenty of time to show me your ID. Now you want to cooperate?" Michael met his gaze, voice calm and confident. "Check it. You'll want to know who you've just cuffed before this gets worse for you." The officer's confidence faltered, but he muttered, "Fine, let's see what you've got." He reached into Michael's pocket, pulled out his wallet, and flicked it open to the ID card. For a moment, he squinted at it, expression unreadable. Then, as he processed the information, the color drained from his face. The name, the title, everything clicked. His eyes darted from the ID to Michael, disbelief and panic flashing across his features. You're... That's right," Michael said, voice smooth and unhurried. "I'm the mayor of this city." The officer's face went pale, the weight of his actions sinking in. He looked back at the ID, as if hoping it would change, but it didn't. He had just assaulted and arrested the highest-ranking official in the city. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the cuffs, his earlier aggression replaced by panic. "Sir, I didn't know. I didn't realize—" Michael cut him off, voice calm but sharper now. "You didn't realize because you assumed. You let your prejudice blind you, and now you're in a situation you can't talk your way out of." The officer's face flushed with embarrassment and fear as he hurriedly unlocked the cuffs, freeing Michael's wrists. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean. Michael's voice rose slightly as he rubbed his sore wrists, eyes blazing with restrained fury. "You didn't mean to punch me? You didn't mean to throw me against that window and treat me like a criminal?" The officer stumbled over his words. "Sir, I thought you were—" "You thought?" Michael snapped, cutting him off. "That's the problem. You didn't think. You saw me standing here, and because I didn't fit your idea of who should be in this neighborhood, you decided I was a threat. That's what you did," the officer stammered, backing up slightly as Michael stepped forward, voice firm and unforgiving. "Do you have any idea what kind of situation you've put yourself in? Do you understand the consequences of your actions tonight?" The officer's eyes widened with fear. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" Michael's voice was cold, slicing through the officer's weak defense. "This is exactly what happens when you let bias dictate your actions. You're supposed to serve and protect, not assault and profile." The officer swallowed hard, face pale, hands shaking. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Michael's voice was low, deadly serious. "You think that's going to fix this? You think an apology is enough to make up for what you just did?" The officer couldn't meet Michael's eyes, his demeanor collapsing under the weight of his realization. Michael took a step back, letting out a long breath. "I want your badge number. Now." The officer fumbled to provide it, his voice barely a whisper as he recited it. Michael took out his phone, jotting it down calmly before looking the officer in the eye one last time. "You'll be hearing from me again," Michael said, tone final. "And next time, you won't be getting off so easily." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the officer standing there, paralyzed with fear and regret. As Michael walked down the empty street, his mind raced. This incident wasn't just personal. It was a symptom of a larger problem he was in a position to address head-on. After tonight, change was coming, one way or another. Michael walked briskly, the weight of the night settling heavily on his shoulders. His jaw ached from the officer's punch, and the faint sting of the handcuffs lingered on his wrists. But more than the physical pain, it was the anger fueling his steps. He couldn't let this slide. Turning the corner, he pulled out his phone, fingers shaking. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. He dialed quickly, the familiar number ringing in his ear. After a few rings, Joshua answered. "Michael?" Michael's voice was clipped and direct. "I need you to meet me at City Hall. Now." Joshua's voice came through, confused but concerned. "What happened? I was just about to—" "I'll explain when you get there," Michael interrupted. "Just get there as soon as you can." Without waiting for a response, Michael ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. His mind raced as he made his way toward City Hall, the city lights casting long shadows on the quiet streets. The officer's smug face flashed in his memory, but more than that, the image of his own reflection in the glass window, pinned, bruised, humiliated, stuck with him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what this represented: unchecked power, blatant profiling, disregard for basic respect. As mayor, he had the power to do something about it. By the time he reached City Hall, Joshua was waiting outside, face drawn with concern. "What happened? You sounded off on the phone." Michael sighed, steadying his thoughts before answering. "I was harassed and assaulted by one of our own officers tonight. I was almost arrested." Joshua's eyes widened in shock. "What? Are you serious?" Michael nodded grimly. "Dead serious. He didn't know who I was. Just assumed I was up to no good because I was standing in a rich part of town at night." Joshua shook his head, disbelief written across his face. I don't even know what to say. What are we going to do?" "We're going to act," Michael said firmly. "I'm done letting this kind of thing slide. I've been talking about reform for too long. Now I have proof. This isn't just some abstract problem. It happened to me." Joshua looked at him, eyes serious. "So what's the plan?" Michael's jaw tightened as he remembered the officer's sneering face, the casual violence. "First, we're filing a formal complaint against the officer. I have his badge number. Then we're taking this up with the police chief. This has to be handled at the highest level. I'm going to make sure this officer faces consequences. And beyond that?" Joshua leaned in. "What about the broader issue?" "This is going to be the catalyst," Michael said. "I've been pushing for reform in the department for months, but now I have the leverage I need. We're going to take this public if we have to. The community needs to know this kind of behavior won't be tolerated anymore." Joshua nodded, expression serious. "I'm with you, whatever you need." "Good," Michael said, "because this isn't going to be easy. The department will push back, and the officer will try to spin this any way he can. But we're not backing down." Joshua looked at him for a moment, then asked quietly, "Are you okay, though?" "I mean, physically." Michael touched his jaw, wincing slightly at the lingering pain. "I'll be fine. It's not the first time I've taken a hit. But this? It's bigger than that. We have to make sure this never happens again. To anyone." Joshua nodded, face grim. "All right, let's get to work." As they entered City Hall, Michael felt the weight of the night's events settle into purpose. This was his moment to act, to turn the injustice he'd faced into fuel for the change the city desperately needed. The officer's smug face and careless actions were a reminder of the systemic problems he'd been fighting for years. But now it was personal, and he wasn't going to let it go. This time, things were going to change. The next day, Michael walked into the police precinct, his jaw still sore from the previous night's assault. Morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the tile floor. Joshua followed close behind, his face set with determination. They moved with purpose toward the front desk, where an officer glanced up from his paperwork, immediately recognizing Michael. "I'm here to see Chief Harlan," Michael said firmly, voice controlled but resolute. The officer hesitated, casting a nervous glance at Michael's bruised face. Yes, sir. I'll let him know you're here." He quickly picked up the phone, relaying the message. Within minutes, Police Chief Harlan appeared from his office at the back of the station. A tall, broad-shouldered man, in his early 50s, with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. His eyes flicked to Michael's bruised jaw, his expression growing serious. "Mr. Trent," Harlan said, extending a hand, which Michael ignored. "Come to my office. We need to discuss what happened." Without waiting for a response, Harlan turned and led them down a long hallway, his steps heavy with authority. They reached his office, and as the door closed, the room grew tense. Harlan gestured toward the chairs in front of his desk, but Michael remained standing. "I understand there was an incident last night," Chief Harlan said, his voice neutral but with a hint of defensiveness. "Incident?" Michael repeated, voice sharp. "I was harassed and assaulted by one of your officers. I was nearly arrested for standing on a sidewalk, and you're calling it an incident?" Before Harlan could respond, the door opened, and Officer Greg Mason walked in, his face pale and tight. He glanced nervously at Michael but quickly looked away. "Officer Mason," Harlan said, motioning to a chair. "We need to clear this up." Mason sat, body stiff, his bravado from the previous night gone, replaced by nervousness as the weight of his actions sank in. He glanced at Harlan, then back at Michael, unable to maintain eye contact. Michael took a step forward, eyes locked on Mason. "Tell me, Officer Mason, what exactly were you thinking last night when you decided to ignore everything I said and escalated a situation that didn't need to be anything more than a conversation?" Mason shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know who you were. I thought—" "You thought," Michael interrupted, voice icy. "You thought you had the right to treat me like a criminal because I didn't fit your idea of who should be standing in that neighborhood at night. You didn't care about the truth." Harlan's expression hardened as he turned to Mason. "Officer Mason, you're aware this behavior is unacceptable. Why didn't you de-escalate the situation?" Mason's eyes flicked between Harlan and Michael. "I made a mistake," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought he was— I didn't know." "You didn't know," Michael said, voice rising. "You didn't know because you didn't care to find out. You let your prejudice dictate your actions, and when I called you out on it, you responded with violence." Mason swallowed hard, face pale. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry isn't going to fix this," Michael said sharply. "You need to understand what you did. You didn't just assault me. You violated your oath. You're supposed to protect and serve this community, not terrorize it." Harlan nodded, tone more serious now. "Officer Mason, you've crossed a line, and there will be consequences. I've already placed you on suspension pending an internal investigation." Mason opened his mouth to respond, but Harlan's cold gaze silenced him. He looked back at Michael, face pale and remorseful, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Michael turned to Harlan, voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about one officer's behavior. This is about a culture in your department that allows officers like Mason to think they can get away with this. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a threat. That's a systemic issue, one that needs to be addressed now." Harlan's face tightened, but he nodded slowly. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Trent, and I'm committed to addressing this situation." Michael crossed his arms, expression unrelenting. "Addressing it? This needs more than an internal investigation. This needs to be public. People need to know this department is taking real steps to reform. I want a full report made public. Transparency. Accountability." Harlan's face hardened slightly, but he kept his tone measured. "We'll make sure the investigation is thorough, and appropriate action will be taken." Michael took a step closer to Harlan's desk, voice lowering but filled with purpose. "This is bigger than one incident, Chief. This is about the future of this department. If real reforms don't happen, I'll make sure the public knows what's going on. This city deserves better." Harlan held Michael's gaze for a long moment before nodding. "Understood." Michael turned to Mason one last time, voice quieter but no less forceful. "You thought you could get away with this because you assumed you had all the power, but now you know you don't, and there will be consequences for your actions." Mason didn't respond, unable to meet Michael's gaze. Without another word, Michael turned and left the office, Joshua following closely behind. The air outside felt lighter, but Michael knew this wasn't over. The fight for justice and reform had just begun. As they exited the precinct, Michael knew the momentum was finally on his side. Now, it was time to make sure the system changed for good. Michael left the precinct with a clear mind, steps steady as he and Joshua made their way to the car. The cold morning air filled his lungs as he breathed deeply, processing the enormity of what had transpired. He had set accountability in motion, but this was only the beginning. Real change would take more than one meeting with the police chief. Joshua broke the silence as they reached the car. "Do you think they'll follow through?" "They'll have to," Michael said, sliding into the driver's seat. "This isn't something they can sweep under the rug, not this time." Joshua nodded but looked concerned. What if they make Mason the scapegoat? Suspend him, maybe fire him, but nothing else changes. Michael tightened his grip on the steering wheel. That's not going to happen. We're not giving them that option. As they drove through the city, Michael's thoughts raced. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down, but it also fueled him. This wasn't just about last night. It was about the broken system that had put him in that situation. His reform agenda couldn't wait any longer. Joshua glanced at him, worry creasing his brow. We need to get ahead of this. Once people hear what happened, the story's going to explode. We need to control the narrative. Michael nodded. We'll go public, but on our terms. The people need to hear the truth, and I'll make sure they get it directly from me. By the time they reached City Hall, Michael had formulated a plan. He moved quickly to his office, mind locked on what needed to happen next. Get the press ready, Michael said, glancing at the clock. I want to hold a press conference this afternoon. No delays. We'll outline what happened, the steps we're taking, and make it clear there will be transparency in this investigation. Joshua nodded, already dialing his phone. Are you going to tell them everything? Michael hesitated, thinking through the details. Yes, they need to know the full truth. We can't gloss over this. Joshua paused, phone in hand. You're going to name the officer? Not yet, Michael said. The investigation still needs to happen, but I'll make it clear what he did and how wrong it was. Within hours, the media gathered outside City Hall. Reporters, news cameras, and members of the public filled the space in front of the building, all waiting for Michael to speak. He could feel the tension building, the city buzzing with speculation. Joshua walked into his office, phone in hand. We're all set. The press is waiting. You sure you want to lay everything out? Michael adjusted his tie in the mirror, jaw still bruised. It's the only way to make sure they understand how serious this is. Joshua nodded. Let's do this. As Michael stepped out of City Hall and approached the podium, the crowd quieted. Cameras flashed, microphones were held high, and all eyes were on him. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Good afternoon, Michael began, voice calm but resolute. I've called this press conference to address an incident that occurred last night, involving one of our city's police officers and myself. The crowd stirred, tension rising as people leaned in. Last night, I was standing outside a store, waiting for a ride, when I was approached by an officer on patrol. Despite my calm explanation of why I was there, the officer became increasingly aggressive. He made assumptions about who I was and why I was there. Michael paused, letting his words sink in. He accused me of loitering, of being up to no good, simply because I didn't fit his idea of who should be in that neighborhood. When I calmly tried to explain myself, the situation escalated. He punched me, handcuffed me, and was about to throw me in the back of his patrol car. A murmur rippled through the crowd, the shock sinking in. At no point did I resist, Michael continued, voice rising with conviction. I was calm, clear, and respectful. But that didn't matter. What mattered to him was what he saw when he looked at me. Not my words, not my explanations. He saw a threat and acted on that assumption. Michael glanced at Joshua, who gave him a nod of encouragement. He turned back to the crowd, voice steady but impassioned. It wasn't until I told him to check my ID that he realized who I was. At that moment, everything changed. The panic set in. He uncuffed me, stammering apologies, realizing the mistake he'd made. But the mistake wasn't just about me. This is about the systemic issues in our police department. He leaned forward slightly, gripping the podium. This isn't just about one officer. It's about a culture that allows these assumptions to be made. It's about a system that lets people be treated as suspects based on their appearance rather than their actions. This is what we've been fighting to change. The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. There will be a full investigation into this officer's actions, Michael continued, and I will personally ensure that it is transparent. The people of this city deserve to know what happens in their police department, and I won't let this be another story that fades into the background." Michael paused, locking eyes with the cameras. "But this is bigger than one incident. This is about making real, lasting changes in our police department. I've been fighting for police reform for years, and last night I experienced firsthand why that fight is necessary. No one should be treated the way I was treated last night." Reporters began shouting questions, their voices rising. Michael held up his hand, silencing them. "There will be more to say as the investigation moves forward, but let me make one thing clear. This is not the end. This is the beginning of real change. I will not stop until every person in this city, no matter who they are or where they're from, can trust they'll be treated fairly and with respect by those sworn to protect them." With that, Michael stepped away from the podium. Joshua met him at the bottom of the steps, expression serious. "That was intense," Joshua said quietly. "But you did what needed to be done." Michael nodded. "It's time for this city to wake up. We've talked about reform long enough. Now it's time to make it happen." As they walked back into City Hall, Michael felt the burden of leadership more acutely than ever, but also a renewed sense of purpose. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Now it was up to him to push for the reforms the city desperately needed. This time, he wouldn't stop until the system changed for good. Michael sat in his office at City Hall, staring out the large windows overlooking the city. The press conference had shaken the city's leadership, and the phone hadn't stopped ringing since he stepped off the podium. Calls from council members, local organizations, and constituents flooded in, everyone wanting to know more, express outrage or support, or demand faster action. The city was waking up, but the challenge ahead was daunting. Joshua entered, phone in hand. "You're getting a lot of attention. Social media's buzzing, and the press is covering the story nonstop." Michael sighed, rubbing his temples. "Good. We need to keep the pressure on. I want people to understand how serious this is." Joshua nodded, stepping closer to the desk. "I've spoken to some community leaders, and they're ready to support you. But they're expecting something concrete. They want to know what reforms you'll be pushing for." Michael nodded slowly, mind racing. "We start with the investigation into Officer Mason, but that's just the first step. We need real systemic changes. More oversight, better training, stricter accountability measures." Joshua's expression was serious. "I agree. But you know the police union will fight this tooth and nail. They're already pushing back against your public statements, saying you're jumping the gun." "I don't care what the union says," Michael replied, voice firm. "If they're not willing to reform from within, we'll push from the outside. This isn't going away." Before Joshua could respond, there was a knock on the door, and Michael's assistant stepped in. "Mr. Trent, the police chief is here to see you." Michael exchanged a quick glance with Joshua before nodding. "Send him in." Chief Harlan entered, his usual confident stride more measured. He offered a tight-lipped nod to both men before sitting across from Michael's desk. A brief, uncomfortable silence followed as Harlan's gaze met Michael's. "Mr. Trent," Harlan began, tone polite but with an edge of defensiveness. "I've seen the coverage of the press conference. I understand why you felt the need to go public, but we need to discuss how we move forward from here." Michael leaned forward, hands clasped. "What's there to discuss? The officer's actions were inexcusable. The investigation needs to move quickly, and there must be consequences." Harlan shifted in his seat. "I agree that Officer Mason's actions weren't. We've launched a thorough investigation, and we've suspended him pending the outcome. But you understand these things take time. We can't rush to judgment." Michael's expression hardened. "I'm not asking for a rushed judgment, Chief. I'm asking for accountability. The public needs to know this is being handled transparently. No delays, no excuses." Harlan frowned slightly. I've served this department for over 30 years. I know the community's trust is fragile right now, but we have to follow proper procedures." Michael took a deep breath, voice calm but persistent. "Chief, this isn't just about procedures. It's about rebuilding trust that's already broken. Officer Mason's actions are part of a larger problem, and you know it. I've had complaints about racial profiling and unnecessary force cross my desk for years, and most go unaddressed." Harlan's jaw clenched. "I'm aware of the issues, but sweeping changes can't happen overnight." "I'm not asking for overnight changes," Michael said, voice rising slightly. "But we can't sit on our hands while this department loses the faith of the people it's supposed to protect. The time for small, incremental fixes is over. We need comprehensive reform, and we need it now." Harlan met Michael's gaze, expression unreadable. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "What exactly are you proposing?" Michael sat back, organizing his thoughts. "First, we need an independent oversight committee outside the department to review complaints of misconduct and recommend discipline. Second, I want mandatory de-escalation training for every officer, with specific focus on racial bias. Third, there must be a public reporting system where residents can see the progress of complaints and investigations." Harlan raised an eyebrow. "An independent oversight committee. You know the union will push back hard on that." Michael nodded. "Let them push. This is non-negotiable. People need to see accountability, that the department isn't protecting its own at the community's expense. Internal investigations can't keep happening quietly behind closed doors." Harlan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're asking for a lot." "I'm asking for what's necessary," Michael replied firmly. "This isn't just about fixing what happened to me. It's about ensuring it doesn't happen to anyone else." Harlan looked down, weighing his options. When he spoke, his voice was lower. "I understand your position, and I agree changes are needed. I'll bring this to the department, but you need to be prepared for a fight. Not just from the union, but from officers who feel like they're being targeted." Michael leaned forward, eyes locked on Harlan. "This isn't about targeting anyone. It's about making the police force better. If any officer feels threatened by accountability, maybe they shouldn't be on the force in the first place." Harlan's lips thinned, but he nodded. "I'll take your proposals to the department leadership. We'll see what we can do." As Harlan stood to leave, Michael remained seated, watching him closely. "Remember, Chief," Michael said quietly, "the eyes of the city are on us right now. Don't let this opportunity for change slip away." Harlan paused at the door, turning back. "I won't," he said, tone more sincere. "We're all in this together, whether we like it or not." When Harlan left, the room fell quiet. Joshua exhaled sharply. "You think he'll actually go through with it?" Michael rubbed his jaw, still tender. "He'll have to. We've come too far to let this fall apart now." Joshua nodded, pacing slightly. "So what's next?" Michael stood, walking to the window and looking out over the city. "Next, we keep pushing. We rally the community, stay visible, and keep the pressure on until real reforms are in place. This isn't just about one bad officer. It's about changing a system." Joshua crossed his arms, a hint of a smile on his face. "I think you're ready for that fight." Michael smiled grimly. "I've been ready for a long time." As the sun set over the city, Michael knew the fight was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, he felt victory, real, lasting change, was within reach. The following day, Michael wasted no time moving his agenda forward. The press conference had sparked a wave of conversations throughout the city, on the streets, in offices, and across every news outlet. The pressure on the police department was intensifying, and Michael knew it wouldn't be long before resistance from the union and department leadership reached full force. He stood in the mayor's office, staring at a stack of paperwork outlining his reform proposals. Joshua entered, expression tense but focused. "I just got off the phone with a few council members. The public's backing your reforms, but there's pushback from the usual suspects." Michael nodded. "I expected that." "Who's pushing hardest?" Joshua sighed. "Some council members with close ties to the police union are being cautious. They're worried about political blowback." "We don't have time for cautious," Michael said firmly. "This isn't about politics. It's about real change." "Right, but they're politicians. They'll protect their own interests first," Joshua replied. Michael glanced at his watch. "We need to get these proposals in front of the council today. If we wait any longer, the momentum dies." Joshua pulled out his tablet. "The police chief just issued a statement. He's backing the investigation but said the department can't allow reforms to weaken officers' ability to do their job." Michael's jaw tightened. "That's code for, we're going to stall." Joshua nodded. "Exactly. But the community's rallying. I've been getting calls from advocacy groups and local leaders all morning. People want action." "Then we give them action," Michael replied. "Set up a meeting with the council and the police union leadership. We'll hash this out." Within hours, Michael stood in a packed meeting room at City Hall, the atmosphere thick with tension. On one side sat several city council members, their expressions ranging from cautious to supportive. Across from them were representatives from the police union, along with Chief Harlan. The union president, a stocky man with a stern face, sat with arms crossed, glaring at Michael. The meeting began with formalities, but Michael cut to the chase. "We're not here to debate the need for reform," he said, voice clear and steady. "The people of this city have spoken, and they want accountability. The system as it stands is broken, and we have an obligation to fix it." The union president shifted in his seat. "Mayor Trent, we've always worked closely with the city, but some of these reforms you're proposing, they'll tie our officers' hands. We can't allow that." Michael leaned forward. "This isn't about tying anyone's hands. It's about ensuring officers are held to the standards we expect from those entrusted with protecting the public. If accountability weakens your force, that's a problem with the force, not the reforms." Harlan cleared his throat. "We support improving training, especially around de-escalation tactics. But the Oversight Committee will cause major friction. Officers will feel like they're constantly being second-guessed by people who don't understand the dangers they face." Michael shot him a hard look. "We're talking about people who don't trust your department to investigate misconduct fairly. The public needs a system they can believe in, and right now, they don't." The council members shifted uncomfortably. Councilwoman Green leaned forward. "I agree with the mayor. If the public can't trust the police to hold their own accountable, we'll never restore confidence in law enforcement." The union president's face reddened. "You're not out there on the streets. Our officers risk their lives every day. You sit behind desks and think you know what it's like." Michael's voice was cool. "What I know is this city can't afford another incident like the one that happened to me, or worse. Every day we delay these reforms, we're putting lives at risk." The room went silent. Harlan spoke again, more measured. "What exactly are you proposing?" Michael listed the reforms swiftly, leaving no room for delay. "An independent oversight committee, mandatory racial bias and de-escalation training, public reporting of complaints, and increased accountability for officers who engage in racial profiling or unnecessary force. This isn't about making the department look better. It's about making it better." The union president stood, furious. "You're going to destroy morale. Our officers already feel under siege." Michael didn't flinch. "Morale isn't the issue when people are being unjustly harassed, profiled, or worse. The system will improve when officers who truly want to serve and protect can do so in a department that holds everyone accountable." The tension thickened, as the union representatives whispered among themselves. After a long pause, a council member spoke up. "We should take this to a vote. We've heard enough." An hour later, the council agreed to move forward with Michael's reform package. It was a victory, but Michael knew it was only the beginning. As he left the meeting room, Joshua caught up with him. "Well, that wasn't easy, but we got what we needed." "For now," Michael said. "The union's not going to take this lying down. We need to prepare for their next move." Joshua nodded. "What's next?" Michael glanced at his phone, already thinking ahead. "Next, we focus on the investigation, and we keep pushing harder than ever." The wheels of reform were in motion, but Michael knew the real fight was just beginning. Days had passed since the city council agreed to move forward with Michael's reform package, but the process was slow, too slow. The police union was doing everything it could to stall the investigation into Officer Mason, and Chief Harlan had become increasingly unresponsive. Every step forward meant new delays, and Michael could feel the pressure building from the community. He knew the public wouldn't wait forever, and neither would he. Sitting in his office, Michael reviewed the latest updates on the investigation, or rather, the lack thereof. Nothing was moving. The department's internal review had stalled under bureaucratic excuses, and Mason's name still hadn't been made public. Joshua entered, looking frustrated. "They're dragging their feet, Mike. The investigation should be moving by now, but Harlan's people are tying it up in red tape. They're trying to run out the clock." Michael clenched his jaw, fingers tapping the desk. "I knew they'd stall, but this is worse than I expected. The community's getting restless." Joshua nodded. "You're right. I've had calls from reporters and local leaders all day asking why the officer's name hasn't been released." Michael leaned back, weighing his options. He'd wanted to let the investigation take its course, but it was clear the department was doing everything to slow things down. If he waited longer, the public's trust, already fragile, would evaporate. "I'm not waiting anymore," Michael said, voice firm. "If they won't move, we will. It's time to release the officer's name." Joshua's eyes widened slightly. "You're sure?" "You know what kind of blowback you'll get." Michael stood, pacing the room. "The people deserve to know who was responsible for what happened to me. The department's trying to protect him, and that's why we're stuck. They think they can hide behind procedure, but not anymore." Joshua nodded, pulling out his phone. "I'll set up a press release. The media will be all over this." "Good," Michael said. "Let them be. I'm not letting Harlan or the union keep stalling while this city waits for justice." Within an hour, Michael stood at a podium outside City Hall. The press gathered again, reporters crowding in close, microphones thrust toward him. The air buzzed with anticipation. Michael looked out at the crowd, face set with determination. "Good afternoon," he began. "As many of you know, we've been working on reforms to address issues within our police department. But despite commitments from the department and city council, the investigation into Officer Greg Mason's actions has been repeatedly stalled. Enough is enough." The crowd quieted, tension palpable. "I've waited patiently for the police department to move forward," Michael continued, "but the delays have gone on long enough. Today, I'm releasing the name of the officer involved in last week's incident. His name is Greg Mason, and he is the officer who wrongfully detained and assaulted me." A murmur rippled through the crowd as reporters scribbled notes and snapped photos. "This isn't just about me," Michael said, voice rising with conviction. "This is about accountability. The people of this city deserve transparency and to know who's responsible when misconduct occurs. Officer Mason's actions were unacceptable, and the public has a right to know his name. We won't allow the department to shield him or delay justice." The reporters' questions came fast, but Michael wasn't done. "I want to make something else clear," he said, eyes locked on the cameras. "This is not just about one officer. It's about a system that's allowed officers like Mason to act without consequences for far too long. We're pushing for real reform, and I won't stop until this city sees the changes it deserves." As Michael stepped away from the podium, the press buzz intensified. Joshua caught up with him as they walked back into City Hall. "That was bold," Joshua said, "but necessary." Michael nodded, mind racing. "It was the only move we had left. Harlan and the union won't be able to hide behind the investigation anymore. They'll have to answer for this." Within hours, the media was flooded with stories about Officer Mason. His name splashed across every major outlet. The community response was immediate. Protests formed outside the police station, and calls for action grew louder. But the biggest shock came later that afternoon. Joshua burst into Michael's office, breathless. "Harlan just stepped down?" Michael looked up, surprised. "What?" "Chief Harlan resigned," Joshua repeated. "The pressure must have been too much. He just made a statement saying he's stepping down, effective immediately. He didn't want to be at the center of this anymore." Michael leaned back, processing the news. He'd expected resistance, not retreat. But this was a victory, even if it came sooner than anticipated. "The department's in chaos right now," Joshua continued. "The union's scrambling, and the community's demanding answers." Michael nodded slowly. "Good. Now we move forward even faster. No more stalling." Harlan's resignation was a turning point, and Michael knew it. With the chief gone, the department was vulnerable, and the momentum for reform was finally in his favor. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, real change felt within reach. With Chief Harlan's resignation rippling through the city, Michael wasted no time pushing forward. The police department was under unprecedented scrutiny, and the city needed decisive action. The next major step was the Internal Review Board's decision on Officer Greg Mason, but Michael wasn't content to sit on the sidelines. Standing in his office, reviewing the latest reports, Joshua entered with an update. "The Review Board's meeting is set for next week," he said, handing Michael a folder. "They're going to decide Mason's future with the department." Michael barely glanced at the folder. "I want in on that meeting." Joshua blinked, taken aback. "You want to sit on the review board? They're not going to like that. The board's supposed to be internal, just the department and union reps." "That's exactly the problem," Michael replied, voice sharp. "I've seen how internal investigations go. They drag it out, debate consequences, then slap the officer on the wrist. Not this time. I want to be in that room. I want to see how they justify keeping a man like Mason on the force." Joshua hesitated. "You're the mayor. You've got the influence to push for this, but they'll push back. The union especially. They'll see it as overstepping." Michael nodded, already moving to his desk to make the call. "Let them push. I'm going to be in that room, and Mason's days in this department are over." By the next morning, Michael had formally requested to sit in on the review board meeting. The backlash was immediate. The union president called it a violation of procedure and an unprecedented political overreach. Several high-ranking officers echoed the sentiment, but Michael didn't care. The public was on his side, and so were the city's community leaders. The pressure to reform was stronger than ever, and this was the moment to strike. The day of the review board meeting arrived. Michael entered the conference room where the board had gathered, a small, private space with a long table at the center. Around it sat members of the police review board, senior officers, a union representative, and a legal advisor. Greg Mason sat at the end, pale but defiant. Michael could feel the tension as he took his seat. The head of the review board, Captain Reynolds, cleared his throat. "Mayor Trent, I understand you've requested to observe today's proceedings." Michael nodded, gaze fixed on Mason. "I'm here because the people of this city demand accountability. Officer Mason's actions were a gross violation of the trust placed in him by the public. I want to ensure this board makes the right decision." Reynolds looked uneasy, but continued. "We're aware of the public interest in this case. However, as you know, these proceedings are typically internal. We're here to review Officer Mason's conduct and determine whether disciplinary action, up to termination, is warranted. Michael leaned forward, voice calm but firm. With all due respect, this case goes beyond internal matters. Officer Mason didn't just violate procedure, he abused his authority. He assaulted me and nearly arrested me without cause, simply because of his biases. This isn't just about department policy. It's about the integrity of the entire force. Mason, silent until now, finally spoke, voice defensive. I did what I had to do. You were standing out there late at night, not answering my questions. I was following my training. Michael turned his gaze toward Mason, expression hard. Your training didn't tell you to ignore what I was saying. Your training didn't tell you to escalate without reason. This isn't about procedure. It's about your assumptions. Mason shifted uncomfortably, voice tight. I've dealt with plenty of situations where someone says they're just waiting for a ride and ends up being a criminal. I made a call. And you made the wrong call, Michael shot back. You made a call based on who I am, not what I was doing. That's the difference. The room fell silent. Reynolds looked between Michael and Mason, then addressed the room. We'll now hear statements from Officer Mason and review the findings of the internal investigation. As the meeting continued, the board reviewed the evidence against Mason, his actions that night, body camera footage, and witness testimony. The case was overwhelming. Michael remained silent for most of the proceedings, but every time Mason tried to justify his actions, Michael's anger rose. Finally, Reynolds turned to Michael. Mayor Trent, before we conclude, is there anything else you'd like to say? Michael stood, eyes locking on Mason. I've heard enough excuses from Officer Mason today. He's refused to take accountability for his actions, and that tells me everything I need to know. The people of this city deserve better. They deserve a police force they can trust, one that serves and protects everyone without prejudice. Keeping Officer Mason on this force would be a stain on this department's reputation. He must be terminated. Mason scowled, voice low. You're making me out to be a monster. I didn't wake up that day planning to arrest anyone. I was doing my job. If that's what you think your job is, then you should never have worn that badge in the first place, Michael replied coldly. Reynolds nodded, looking around the room. The board will now deliberate. An hour later, the board returned with their decision. Reynolds spoke clearly, voice steady. After reviewing the evidence and hearing all statements, the board has decided that Officer Greg Mason's actions were in violation of department policy. His conduct was unprofessional and unacceptable. Officer Mason is hereby terminated from the police department, effective immediately. Michael felt a wave of relief but kept his expression neutral as Mason stood, visibly shaken. The former officer didn't make eye contact with anyone as he left the room. Reynolds turned to Michael. Thank you for being here, Mayor Trent. We understand this was an important decision for the city. Michael nodded, voice resolute. This was the right decision, but it's just the beginning. The people of this city are watching, and we need to keep pushing for reforms to prevent this from happening again. As Michael left the room, Joshua met him in the hallway, a look of satisfaction on his face. It's done. Mason's gone. Michael nodded. It's a victory, but there's more to do. We need to make sure the reforms go through. Joshua smiled. One battle at a time, Mike. You've made history today. Michael glanced back at the review board's room, feeling the weight of the moment. Maybe, but we've got more battles ahead. As they walked out of City Hall, Michael knew that while Mason was gone, the fight for real change had just begun. This victory was significant, but deep-rooted issues in the department still needed addressing. The road to reform was long, but Michael was ready to lead the way.